The notification was subtle, just a small alert on her phone, a bank transaction from a restaurant in Milan. There was nothing unusual about that, considering that her boyfriend, Lucas, was currently on one of his infamous solo trips, but the total on the receipt told another story. A table for two. Emilia, to those who knew her well, sat on her living room couch, her fingers absently tracing the rim of a half-full wine glass. She didn't feel anger, nor even sadness. Just an odd sense of curiosity. Did he really think he could outplay her? Lucas had always prided himself on being meticulous, a planner down to the finest detail, a man who spoke in careful half-truths, crafting his reality with precision. He was charming, calculating, and convinced that he was always one step ahead. But what he never understood, what most men like him never understood, was that silence wasn't weakness. It was observation. And right now, Emilia was watching. She opened her laptop, her movements unhurried. She scrolled through her messages with Lucas, rereading the same predictable words. Miss you, baby. Wish you were here. Just me, the city, and my thoughts. Lies, all of them. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could have confronted him right there, sent a single screenshot, a casual, "Who are you dining with?" and let him scramble for an excuse. But where was the artistry in that? No, this wasn't about catching a liar. It was about displaying the truth in a way that couldn't be denied. She poured herself another glass of wine and made a call. Detective Lawrence speaking. Good evening. I need your services. The truth unfolds. Over the next week, Emilia received the truth piece by piece, wrapped in digital evidence and photographic proof. Lucas, strolling along the canals, hand in hand with a woman who was not her, a candlelit dinner, his face illuminated by flickering light, leaning in close to whisper something intimate. A kiss. That was the moment Emilia knew she had everything she needed. It would be so easy to react emotionally, to throw everything at him in a fit of rage. But that wasn't her style. Emilia preferred something colder, something more refined. She wanted Lucas to feel the weight of his deception. Not through accusations, but through inevitability. And so the real planning began. She had the photos printed, not just as simple images, but as elegant black and white portraits, framed with care as if they belonged in a gallery, a work of art. After all, wasn't this a masterpiece of betrayal? She wrapped them in fine paper, a perfect little gift, tied with a sleek satin bow. A delivery, straight to his office. A performance where she wouldn't even need to say a word. As she sealed the package, Emilia allowed herself a small, knowing smile. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. The courier arrived at precisely 8:45 a.m., right on time. Dressed in a sharp black uniform, he blended in seamlessly with the corporate atmosphere of Lux & Co., the high-end marketing agency where Lucas held his pristine corner office. His job was simple. Deliver the elegantly wrapped package marked, "For Lucas Sinclair, urgent." Emilia had chosen the timing carefully. The early morning was perfect. The office was abuzz but not chaotic, filled with employees still settling in, grabbing their coffee, exchanging pleasantries. They were awake enough to be curious, but not yet buried in their work. The receptionist, a young woman with pastel pink nails tapping against her keyboard, raised a brow at the package but ultimately shrugged. Lucas received deliveries all the time. Clients, partners, luxury brands he pretended to hate but secretly adored. This, however, was different. "Should I let Mr. Sinclair know?" she asked, looking up at the courier. "Not necessary," he replied smoothly. "It's already been arranged." And so the game began. The unwrapping. Lucas arrived 15 minutes later. Perfectly tailored suit, polished shoes, the picture of a man who believed he had the world at his fingertips. He was charming as always, flashing a smile at the receptionist, exchanging a few easy jokes with passing colleagues. He didn't notice the shift in energy as he stepped into the office. The air had changed. A quiet anticipation hung in the space. Some people glanced at him, others exchanged subtle looks, but no one said a word. Then he saw it, a black box sitting on his desk, pristine and mysterious, the kind of packaging that hinted at exclusivity. Lucas loved exclusivity. His assistant, Ethan, hovered nearby, a little too still, watching with an odd intensity. Lucas gave him a sidelong glance. "Did someone send this?" Ethan cleared his throat. "It was delivered this morning. We thought it was something important, so..." We opened it. Lucas froze. That pause, half a second, maybe less, was where the cracks started to form, because inside the box, nestled within velvet lining, were photographs, black and white, artistic, too clear to deny. A kiss in a dimly lit alley, Lucas's hand resting on a woman's hip as they shared a secret only lovers knew. A moment frozen in time, captured in cruel detail. The final photo, perhaps the most devastating, showed him at the hotel entrance, turning toward her, the unmistakable warmth in his gaze. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a drunken lapse in judgment. It was deliberate affection. Lucas exhaled slowly, picking up one of the frames. The weight of it in his hand felt suffocating. His mind raced. Who? How? When? But before he could think of a plausible escape, a voice from behind cut through his panic. Lucas? He turned. Clara? She stood there, eyes flicking between him and the photographs. She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. The silence was so much worse. Her gaze didn't hold anger, it held realization, that sharp, sinking moment when everything clicks into place. Lucas opened his mouth, scrambling for words, but Clara wasn't listening. Neither were his colleagues. They had already seen enough. The final move. Amelia sat by her window, sipping espresso, watching the city move beneath her. She didn't need to be there to witness it. She didn't need to see him crumble under the weight of his own lies. The beauty of her plan was its simplicity. Lucas had orchestrated his own downfall. All she had done was present the evidence and let nature take its course. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Was it you? A slow smile spread across her lips. She deleted the message, and just like that, she was done. Lucas sat in his office, motionless. The air felt heavier than it should, pressing against his skin, his suit suddenly too tight, the silk of his tie like a noose. The photos, damning, undeniable, stared back at him from his desk. He had always thought himself untouchable. Carefully curated alibis, well-timed business trips, the ability to craft words so smoothly they felt like truth even when they weren't. But now, his secrets were not just exposed, they were framed. There was no scandalous confrontation, no screaming accusations, no messy breakup for him to twist in his favor. Instead, he had been placed under the brightest, most unforgiving light, in full view of everyone who once respected him. He had been made a spectacle. His assistant, Ethan, lingered in the doorway, his usual air of quiet obedience replaced by something else. Pity. Lucas clenched his jaw. Who opened it? His voice came out tight, controlled, the only thing he could still control. Ethan hesitated. It arrived early, you weren't in yet, and... He exhaled. Lucas, people saw. I thought it was a client gift, and then... He gestured helplessly at the photographs. Lucas's stomach churned. It wasn't just the photos. It was the setting. A box, carefully wrapped. A presentation. This wasn't an accident. This was intentional. And there was only one person who could have orchestrated it so effortlessly. Amelia. The thought sent a wave of cold realization through him. He had underestimated her. He had thought, wrongly, that she would rage, cry, break down, that she would want a scene. Instead, she had made him the scene. And the worst part, she wasn't even here to watch it unfold. The aftermath begins. His phone vibrated against the desk. He barely had the nerve to check it, already knowing what was coming. Messages, calls, silence from those who mattered, whispers from those who didn't. Clara hadn't texted. A quick search confirmed his worst fear. Her social media accounts had vanished. No updates, no passive-aggressive quotes, no cryptic captions, just gone. His other life had been erased in an instant. A knock at the door. He looked up sharply. It was Elise, his firm's director of communications. Poised, severe, the kind of woman who handled PR nightmares before they had the chance to become disasters. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. Lucas, she said, setting a folder on his desk. The silence stretched. Finally, he forced himself to speak. Damage control? She exhaled sharply, as if debating whether to indulge him in pleasantries. She chose not to. We've already received inquiries from clients, she said flatly. Eh? Situation like this isn't great for optics. His stomach tightened. Elise, this is personal. Not anymore, she countered. Not when half the office witnessed it. Lucas rubbed his temples. He could feel the walls closing in. I need a list of who's been asking questions, he said, voice controlled but firm. I'll handle it. Elise didn't move. Lucas, she said, voice lower, calmer, you should probably take some time off. A bitter laugh almost escaped him. So this was how it started. The distancing, the careful removal of someone who had become a liability. Of course, he said smoothly, masking the growing dread. I'll take a step back. Her expression gave nothing away, but she nodded. We'll talk soon. He didn't watch her leave. His eyes were locked on the photographs. Again, Amelia had done more than expose him. She had dismantled him. Meanwhile, across the city, Amelia sat at a cafe, a cappuccino in front of her, untouched. The morning rush moved around her, people lost in their routines, oblivious to the quiet satisfaction curling at the corners of her lips. She had imagined how Lucas would react, the disbelief, the panic, the realization that he had no escape plan. She didn't need to witness it firsthand. The silence was enough. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She knew who it was. A single text. Was it you? She smiled. He wasn't asking because he needed confirmation. He was asking because he wanted an opening, a chance to regain control. She didn't give it to him. Delayed. She took a slow sip of her coffee. For the first time in a long while, she felt weightless. Lucas was finally experiencing something he had never truly understood. Consequences. The breaking point. Lucas had underestimated how quickly his world could unravel. By lunchtime, whispers had turned into full conversations. By afternoon, it was no longer whispers. The weight of Amelia's silence, of Clara's disappearance, of his colleagues' hushed tones, it was suffocating. His mind raced through scenarios. Could he spin this? Could he control the narrative? He reached for his phone, called Amelia. No answer. Try again. Voicemail. Lucas exhaled slowly. His hand shook slightly as he set his phone down. For the first time in his life, he was completely outmaneuvered. He had always thought of Amelia as reserved, methodical, passive. But this wasn't passivity. This was precision. And she hadn't just left him in ruins. She had made sure he had to live in them. Lucas stared at his reflection in the mirror of his private office bathroom. He looked different. Not in a way anyone else would notice immediately, but he could see it. The slight hollowness under his eyes, the stiffness in his jaw. He wasn't sure if it was exhaustion or if the weight of what had happened had already begun to age him. His hands gripped the edge of the sink. He needed a way out. There was always a way out. He had salvaged business deals from near to salt, talked himself out of the worst situations, twisted narratives so cleanly that even the people he had wronged ended up apologizing to him. This should be no different. Yet it was, because he hadn't been the one to set the stage this time. And worst of all, Amelia hadn't played the game. She hadn't confronted him, hadn't cried or screamed. She had simply walked away. And somehow, that was the most unforgivable part of all. Damage control. By mid-afternoon, Lucas had convinced himself that if he could contain the fallout, he could survive this. The photos were bad, yes. The whispers in the office, worse. But he could handle whispers. They would die out if he gave them something else to focus on. His plan was simple. Talk to Clara. She was emotional, but emotions faded. He could twist this, tell her what she wanted to hear, convince her she was overreacting, silence the office gossip, make a few jokes, act unaffected. If he treated it like a non-gimmish, people would eventually follow his lead. Confront Amelia, not for an argument, he knew better than that, but he needed to understand how she had done it. He needed to know if there was more coming. His pulse steadied. Yes, he could handle this. Or so he thought. The first crack. At exactly 3 p.m., Lucas called Clara. No answer. He tried again, straight to voicemail. His grip on his phone tightened. This wasn't a good sign. Maybe she was just cooling off. Maybe. Then came the email. Subject, forwarded from HR. Lucas clicked it open, frowning. Mr. Sinclair, per our company's professional conduct policy, we've received concerns regarding workplace relationships that may present a conflict of interest. Given the nature of recent events, we advise an in-person discussion with HR and legal counsel. His stomach dropped. Workplace relationships? They weren't talking about Clara. They were talking about his reputation, about whether he had used his position to leverage relationships. This was worse than whispers. This was real trouble. His eyes darted around the room as if a physical escape existed. And then the real blow landed. The second crack. At 3:45 p.m., Lucas received a message from an unknown number. At first, he thought it was Amelia again. Maybe she had finally decided to respond. But it wasn't her. It was a link. No context, no signature, just a single URL. Lucas hesitated before clicking. It took him to a forum one he had never heard of before. The thread title was simple: The Fall of Lucas Sinclair. A thread about him. His breath caught as he scrolled. Anonymous post. 1. I used to work under Lucas. Not surprised this happened. Man's been cheating his way through life for years. Anonymous post 2. Remember when he claimed that big contract was his deal? Yeah, it wasn't. He stole credit from 2 people I know. Anonymous post 3. Not just a cheater in relationships, a liar in business too. Anonymous post 4. I have receipts. I'll post them soon. Lucas felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't just about his affair anymore. This was about everything. People were lining up to watch him burn. Elsewhere, Amelia sat in a high-accent boutique trying on sunglasses. Her phone buzzed on the marble counter. A message from a friend. You've started something. She smiled, slipping on a pair of sleek black frames. I only gave the truth a stage, she replied. Lucas did the rest himself. And wasn't that the beauty of it? She hadn't dragged his skeletons out of the closet. She had simply opened the door and let the world see. The collapse. By the time Lucas left the office at 6 p.m., he was a different man. His calls to Clara had gone unanswered. His attempts to quash the rumors had only stoked them further. At the parking garage, he hesitated before unlocking his car. The world outside felt different now. He had spent years building an image of power, charm, and control, and in a single day, that image had shattered. He checked his phone one last time. Nothing from Amelia. He gritted his teeth, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. No, this wasn't over. He wouldn't let it be over. He just needed to find a way back, even if it meant breaking the rules one last time. Meanwhile, Amelia paid for her sunglasses, leaving the store with a quiet sense of satisfaction. She knew Lucas. She knew how his mind worked. He wouldn't accept defeat. He would try to regain control, to twist the story, and that was fine, because Amelia still had one last move to play. And when she did, Lucas would finally learn what it felt like to be truly powerless. Lucas had never felt this kind of silence before. Not the comfortable kind that follows a long day. Not the expectant hush before a big deal closes. This silence was different. It was the kind that followed exposure, the kind that crept into the spaces where confidence used to be. By morning, the forum post had spread. Clients were calling, not directly. No, they wouldn't do that. They called his firm, his bosses. His carefully built empire was crumbling, and he couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. Luke had never been a man who begged. But today, he was dangerously close to it. He had spent years believing he could talk his way out of anything. But how did you talk your way out of evidence? Amelia's last gift. When the final package arrived, Lucas almost didn't open it. Not because he was afraid, but because he already knew who it was from. It was smaller than the first one. No frames, just a simple white envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a single Polaroid, a photo of him, not with Clara, not in a hotel. It was a picture of Lucas, alone, sitting at his desk in his office. He looked unaware, distracted, maybe even a little lost. Amelia had taken it weeks ago, before everything unraveled, before he even realized she knew. She had been planning this all along, and scrawled at the bottom of the image, in Amelia's precise, elegant handwriting, was a single sentence. You were never as careful as you thought. Lucas exhaled sharply, gripping the edges of the Polaroid. She had won, not because she exposed him, but because she had done it with such quiet precision that he never even saw it coming. She didn't need to scream or cry, and she didn't need to demand justice. She had simply placed the truth in plain sight and let the world do the rest. Checkmate. Lucas's resignation was accepted the next day. Officially, it was to focus on personal matters. Unofficially, it was the only way out. By now, Clara had cut all contact. Clients had begun distancing themselves, uncomfortable with the scandal. And Amelia? She never responded to his calls, never sent another message. Because in the end, he wasn't worth a second act. The last goodbye. 1 week later, Amelia boarded a flight. No dramatic exit, no lingering regrets. She sat by the window, watching the city shrink below, her past becoming smaller with every passing second. Lucas would survive. That was the cruelest part of it all. Men like him always did, but he would never recover the way he wanted to, because power was never about what you owned, it was about what you controlled. And now, Lucas controlled nothing. Amelia smiled, leaning back into her seat. Checkmate.